Hello and welcome. Thank you all so much for being here. My name is Janine Sheffert, and I will be your host tonight for your Livable Future Live. This is our monthly virtual education series, and I am going to put myself on there. There we go. This is our monthly virtual education series, Livable Future Live. Tonight, we have the privilege to view The Jungle, a modern day take on the 1906 Upton Sinclair novel of the same name. The documentary we are about to watch is an expose that unveils centuries of greed and exploitation in America's meat industry. It calls into question the profiteering off of ecosystems, and it shows how Indigenous knowledge may be the key to creating an equitable food future for both people and planet. Following the film, we are honored to be joined this evening by Food and Water Watch's Factory Farm Organizing Director, Krissy Kasserman, and the film director himself, Matt Wechsler. Before we get started, I'll go over a couple of Zoom reminders and announcements for upcoming events. For any of you new to Food and Water Watch, welcome. We are a national organization fighting for sustainable food, clean water, and a livable climate for all. We organize for grassroots activism at local, state, and federal levels of government, and we work to create the solutions and the change we all need. This year marks our 20th anniversary, and we are excited. There we go. We are excited to invite you all to a celebration of those 20 years of wins. We will be gathering together in community and solidarity at a benefit that I would love for you to join. We'll have a reception in New York City on May 6th and a virtual conference on May 13th. I'm very excited about our two virtual conference keynotes. Zephyr Teachout is a professor of law at Fordham University, where she focuses on the intersection of corporate power and political power. And U.S. Senator Cory Booker, who recently broke the record for the longest speech in Senate history, has been a longtime food and water champion working along with us. We're excited for his keynote speech as well. We also have a number of exciting presenters and panelists, including a presentation on avian flu, a youth activist panel, and more. Please consider joining us for both the in-person May 6th reception in New York City and the May 13th virtual conference here in the comfort of your own home. We'll put a link in the chat for tickets and for more information. And coming up in June, on Wednesday, June 18th, we will be talking with our legal team, Food and Water Justice, about what we're doing in the courts to defend safe food, clean water, and a livable climate as the Musk-Trump administration takes aim at environmental law and the rule of law itself. I hope you'll join us for that event as well, and we'll put a sign-up link in the chat. And finally, this is a special screening of a film that is not yet available to the public. So we will not be recording the film itself today, but we will be recording the Talkback with Matt afterwards. And I will share that recording with you in an email I will send out tomorrow. Tonight's film shines a spotlight on some of the major harms that can come from putting profit over the health of our communities and our planet. This is exactly what Food and Water Watch fights against every day. Like I said, we have 20 years history of winning, and we will continue to take on factory farms, protect our water from toxic chemicals, and stand up against corporate greed. And it's the power of the people, of all of us, coming together and joining forces that we get this work done. You can get involved with this work in many different ways, including joining our volunteer network, attending events like you are right now, and making a donation. And in honor of Earth Day, all gifts today through Friday are being matched 3-to-1, so you can have triple the impact. At a time when we know we are going to need to resist this administration hard for the next several years, monthly giving is one of the most impactful ways to sustain these efforts to protect our planet and its people from corporate oligarchs. We don't take any corporate funding, so we are not beholden to any special interests other than the health of our communities and our planet. Our support comes from people like you, and your support now strengthens us for the many fights ahead. So thank you so much for your generosity. And with that, let's get started with the film. What a powerful film. I appreciate the idea that we can all look at our own power and privilege and recognize our ability to feed the part of ourselves that cares for the planet or the part of ourselves that colonizes the planet. I think part of my power and privilege today is being right here, right now, able to share this film with you. It is an honor and a privilege. And I'm thrilled that my colleague Krissy Kasserman is joining us for this discussion. Krissy is Food and Water Watch's Factory Farm Organizing Director. She manages our state level organizing work on factory farm issues in Oregon, Iowa, and New Mexico, as well as organizing work in support of our federal factory farm priorities. Krissy, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Janine. I'm very glad to be here.
And I am so thrilled that this evening, filmmaker and director of The Jungle, Matt Wechsler, is here to talk to us about the film that we just watched.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to join you all.
There we go. Got you on the screen as well. Welcome, Matt. So 12 years ago, Matt created his first documentary, Sustainable, after tasting seasonal vegetables for the first time at a farmer's market. Since then, he went on to create a second documentary called Right to Harm. And the film we just watched, The Jungle, is his third documentary about the American food system. We are honored to have Matt here tonight to talk to us about this film. Matt, thank you again for being here with us this evening.
Oh, thanks.
If you have questions for Matt or Krissy, I know we have a lot of questions already, but go ahead and put them in the Q&A box, and I will try to incorporate as many of them as we can. So Matt, let's start at the beginning. As I just mentioned, The Jungle is your third documentary about the American food system. Tell us more about what led you to make this particular film.
Yeah, so with every film that I've done, the next film has been part of the learning process of the previous film. So Right to Harm came out of meeting Dr. John Eichert through the process of making Sustainable, and he introduced me to the idea of the issues that rural communities face that live around factory farms, and that was the idea behind that film. And then as I was screening that film, actually, as I was at the Cleveland International Film Festival, and I was sitting down with a pasture pork producer named Greg Gunthorpe, who was in the film, and he was speaking he was doing the Q&A for the film festival, and we went to a restaurant where the restaurant said that they served a lot of local meats, and I said, Greg, I think it's okay for us to eat the meat here. What do you think? And he said, I don't think so, Matt. He's like, it might say local here, but if I went in the back, I bet you I would trace it back to a CAFO in Colorado. And he really opened my eyes to the idea of the complete monopolization of the industry and the bait and switch that happens at the grocery level or at the restaurant level. And it just it took my already distrust for the industry, and it just lowered it just a whole nother notch. But it really made me feel that I needed to make a film about the monopoly issue, and one that was a retelling at some level of The Jungle, because I just had not heard very much out there about the issues that we're currently facing now, and how they're so similar to the issues that happened in the early 1900s. So that was the precipice for making the film, and it's great to be at this point where it now can screen for people.
Speaking of the conversation of the meat industry, you start the film off by describing the genocide of buffalo in the West in the 1800s. That's not always where people start when they think about the current American meat industry. Why did you decide to start the film there, and why is it important that we not miss that beginning of the story?
Yeah, I think it's important to note that there was a food system that existed in North America, and it did feed people. It actually might have been the food system that fed people throughout the longest civilizations on the planet. as we know, there were civilizations in the Middle East that came and gone, and there has been desertification that happened in that area from a lot of farming. But generally speaking, North America survived a lot of the attacks on the land that humans have done over the course of 12,000 years. And so buffalo was an absolute source of protein for Native Americans, and one that you did not have to pay for, right? One that was available to people. And so the whole idea of the meat system is not about providing food. It's about controlling food and controlling people's ability to have access to it. And so I felt it was absolutely necessary to start with that. Plus, I really wanted to tie in the whole idea of the environment and how food is affecting the environment. And buffalo are known as a keystone species. Where you see buffalo roaming, you see uh, hundreds of different grasses growing. You see a lot more wildflowers. You see a lot more insects. You see a larger bird populations, larger small mammal populations. And so that's what a keystone species can do, and they can do it a lot better than cattle can. So we can stand to have a lot more buffalo in the Great Plains to help regulate that whole ecosystem.
Yeah, thank you. And speaking of environment, one of the things the film talked about was how the factory farm system has become entrenched and incentivized by the U.S. government. Krissy, I have a question for you here, and this is coming up a bit in the chat here too, or in the Q&A. Could you speak to the climate and the environmental impacts of this incentivization and of factory farming in the U.S. broadly?
Yeah, thanks, Janine. I am honored to share the stage with Matt tonight to discuss this excellent film. So, American agriculture has been shaped by corporate interests and greed since the beginnings of the country, which the film described so well. And it's been fraught with contradictions bent on generating power and wealth. These forces have not only created a farm crisis, but also environmental and climate degradation on a massive scale. And today, livestock production is responsible for 14.5% of all human sources of greenhouse gases. That is a huge number, and something that I think a lot of people don't realize. At Food and Water Watch, we take this toll really seriously, and we look at the whole picture. So fairness for farmers, animal welfare, corporate control, climate, and our environment. The factory farm system is the creation of a series of policy choices that have compromised on all of these areas. And corrupt farm bills and politicians have set farmers on a treadmill of overproduction of corn and soy. And that is in part what made the factory farm system possible. And today, the greatest contribution to these climate emissions comes from producing and processing animal feeds, from fertilizing, harvesting, transporting, and processing grains for animal consumption. So not only is this whole system really bad for the climate, but it also generates vast amounts of air and water pollution. So manure from factory farms emits a slew of toxic air pollutants, including, but not limited to, respiratory hazards such as particulate matter, ammonia, and hydrogen sulfide. Factory farms also produce more manure than nearby fields can absorb, and the excess often runs off into our rivers and streams, carrying all kinds of chemical additives, pathogens like E. coli, and antibiotics into our waters. Agriculture is the leading known cause of pollution in US rivers and streams, and is the second largest known contributor to the contamination of our wetlands. Pollution from animal feeding operations threatens or impairs over 13,000 miles of US rivers and streams. The federal government and states have utterly failed in upholding our nation's environmental laws when it comes to big ag, which has allowed for factory farms to proliferate at the expense of our air, water, and climate.
Yeah, thank you. Matt, a theme that stuck out to me in this film was that the industrialized food system never had anything to do with feeding people. And you've just talked about that a bit just now, that it's organized for profit without regard to the damage that it does to the environment or agricultural workers. Much of Food and Water Watch's work is based on breaking that corporate stronghold, as Krissy's been describing. What reaction have you seen from people who are introduced to this idea for the first time through your film?
Yeah, I mean, whether it's been my film Sustainable or Right to Harm or this film, there's always a handful of first-time watchers, and often I see them go through a very similar mental recheck that I went through myself when I first came to learn this. It's not information you can unlearn, and then you have to face what you're going to do about it. You know, how are you going to change your own personal habits? And I've seen the struggle on people's faces, knowing that now they know this information. Now what are they going to do, right? How can they empower themselves? And so often, very immediately, the conversation goes to how can I change my eating habits in with knowing I have access to this and this, and it gets very specific, like, oh, there's this producer here, there's this producer there. Often I get, like, if it's friends of mine who learn this for the first time, I'm getting text messages from them in the weeks to follow, like, what do you think about this farm, about me buying meat from this farm, or me buying produce from this farm? And so they're trying, and obviously there's a big curve to come over for people to understand, I think, fully how to, like, eat ethically and how to continue making ethical decisions, because the conventional food system has just thrown all sorts of non-ethical possibilities at us all. So, and then when it comes to this film specifically, I think the biggest reality check a lot of people have is their own colonizing mentality. Even those who have been in the space and have wanted to be conscious about caring for the environment or caring for the food system, or working or buying from farmers directly, there's still a reality check of their own colonizing mentality. And so that's one of the messages that I hope really rings true with people, and it is something that people take away and think about. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a good challenge. Thank you. Krissy, one of the promises the film makes is that if we move away from this extractive colonizing system of agriculture and lean into indigenous ways of working the land, that we can restore both people and planet. What do you see as some of the biggest barriers to farming in this regenerative way?
Great question. So, as the film discusses, agribusiness, from meat companies like Tyson to grain monopolies like Cargill and biotech seed and chemical giants like Monsanto, built the corporate industrial food system that we have today. So, this transition to factory farms was not an accident. It was not inevitable. It was fueled by bad farm policies that led to an overproduction of cheap feed and to unrestricted access to antibiotics to keep disease at bay in these overcrowded confinement buildings. It was further enabled by federal regulators allowing the biggest meat companies to unfairly dominate the market, and, as I just described, by the EPA and states failing to uphold our environmental laws. So, relying on the marketplace, which is controlled by the biggest players, to correct the factory farm problem won't work. We should all absolutely do whatever we can in our own lives to embrace and participate in something that's more sustainable and regenerative. But getting rid of factory farms will require us to change the fundamental structure of the food system. It was bad policy that brought us here, and building a better food system will require policy change. So there's a long list, but a few things that we need to do include enforcing our antitrust laws to break up the agribusiness stranglehold on our food system, establishing some supply management programs to ensure that grain producers can make a fair living without flooding the market with cheap grains that just go to feed factory farms. We need to create policy incentives for encouraging rather, the kind of diversified and regenerative farms that are shown in the film. And we need to rebuild the local and regional infrastructure needed for small and mid-sized livestock producers to get their animals to market. This is one of the biggest barriers. So much of Food and Water Watch's work is in support of these kinds of policy proposals.
Yeah, thank you. Um, Matt, the first farmer that you talk to in the film is Chuck Wirtz in West Bend, Iowa. He says that there used to be pig farms up and down the road, but they all had to get big or get out, demonstrating how farmers are often forced to join this contract grower system for these huge corporations or decide to quit farming. Food and Water Watch has worked in Iowa for a long time, and I live in Iowa, and we frequently hear from this very sentiment from farmers, which is it's why that we're advocating for a moratorium on new and expanding factory farms in Iowa. But building that political power, like Krissy said, to make that policy change is a long-term campaign goal. What do you say to a farmer who felt that they had to buy into this factory farm system in order to keep farming?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think it's really important to have the conversations with those farmers. And oftentimes, for my past films, it was really difficult to get somebody from the industry to want to participate in the film. They think obviously it's going to be like a gotcha style thing. But Chuck was very willing to talk. He was going through the process of going from being an owner of pigs to being a janitor of pigs. And so he was willing to talk about his story. And I had a really good time meeting with him. I couldn't drink any of the water that was around there, including the Airbnb I stayed in West Bend, because and even said it, there was even a sign on the refrigerator that says don't drink the water, because the town is dedicated to the movement of pigs and pig manure. So but to somebody like Chuck, who, Chuck got into it in the 1970s when he thought it was revolutionary, only to come to learn that he's a cog in the wheel. And that's what I often, get to saying to those who are in that position, that it's unfortunate, but you're just a cog in the wheel to these people. You're just somebody they can step over and they can abuse. And it's tough. And Chuck actually did try other avenues of raising pigs and stuff, but his location of where he's at is just everyone in that town is really dedicated to the style of raising hogs that they do. And he's now in organic grain production, which sounds good, but it's not really all that good, because he doesn't mind being a custodian for the hog farms, for the hog CAFOs, because the manure is highly valuable and unfortunately still okay for organic grain production. And so that's the fertilizer that's used for the organic grain production. So it only further pollutes the wells and stuff like that. At least he's not in the pig business anymore. But I think the main thing is that what can we do to continue to bridge the gap with farmers like this, so that the conversation is there, so that they're not scared to talk to us. So I think we have a lot of commonalities, and we actually have a lot of similar things to that we advocate for. And so that's what I'd hope to see in the future.
Yeah, thank you. Krissy, Food and Water Watch just filed a motion to intervene in a federal lawsuit defending protections for farmers and ranchers from discrimination, retaliation, and deception under the antitrust law Packers and Stockyards Act of 1921, which is the very act named in this film multiple times. This law was supposed to ensure competition in the market, but similar to in Upton Sinclair's novel, The Jungle, was written in 1906, we currently have 4 firms controlling 85% of beef processing, 70% of pork processing, and 54% of chicken processing. As we saw in the film, the result is food that is less safe, foodborne illnesses are more prevalent, and agricultural workers are not adequately protected. Why hasn't the Packers and Stockyards Act been enough to protect people and the planet, and what more is needed?
Yeah, so the Packers and Stockyards Act was enacted, as the film discussed, to level the playing field for farmers in their dealings with these monopolistic meat packers. It is supposed to prohibit meat packers and poultry companies from subjecting farmers, ranchers, and consumers to anti competitive, deceptive, and abusive business practices. And it is supposed to give the Department of Agriculture and the Department of Justice tools to address this conduct when it occurs. But unfortunately, the law has not kept up with changes in the livestock industry, which, as we've discussed over the past 50 years, has seen rampant consolidation, reduced market transparency, and the rise of these unfair contract terms for farmers and ranchers. So, not to sound like a broken record, but fixing these issues and building the kind of food system discussed in the film will again require policy change. We need to enact legislation and enforce existing rules that will reset this balance and break up the monopolistic practices that are crushing farmers. The good news is that we know good policy that works, and we're advocating for several bills at the federal level that will do this. One is, it's a mouthful, the Food and Agribusiness Merger Moratorium and Antitrust Review Act, which, among other things, puts a pause on large agribusiness, food and beverage manufacturing, and grocery retail mergers. And then secondly, the Farm System Reform Act, which would strengthen the Packers and Stockyards Act while also leveling the playing field between farmers and these giant corporations. And then finally, the Biden administration pursued a package of rules that would have breathed new life into the Packers and Stockyards Act. But unfortunately, these advancements are now threatened in the Trump administration. So we're going to keep working to build the political power necessary to harness more of these wins and to protect the progress that we've already made.
Yeah, thank you. We only have time for a couple more questions. I just want to say there are so many good questions coming in through the Q&A. Thank you for submitting them all. I know we won't get to all of them, but thank you for them. One of the things I want to point out here, Matt, too, is just a lot of people saying how incredible this film is, and thank you for making it and coming up with some great ideas for more films too. So we'll send you some. We'll send you this afterwards too. Let's go on to the next question here. I think I'll ask this question to both of you, but we'll start with you, Matt. Throughout the film, you connect our current food system to colonization, and you uphold it as a contradiction to Indigenous ways of connecting to the land. At the very end of the film, Reginaldo tells us that we are all born with both of these possibilities in us. How can Americans who have been brought up in the current industrialized food system help to make this change within ourselves? And how can we support a broader systems change?
Yeah, this was the biggest question that I asked myself, and the biggest epiphany that I had as I made this film, and felt like, well, this has to be the takeaway of the whole thing, because this is the key to the mind switch in how we approach the planet at large, eating at large, how we communicate with people at large. I'll give you my answer, and I'll give you Reihi's answer. And my answer is that when you look at your lawn, if you live in a house where you have a lawn, don't think of it as grass that needs to be cut. Think of it as an ecosystem that is home to likely tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of living creatures underneath it. How can you steward that ecosystem? If you think of the tree that's in your backyard, it's not necessarily something to prune, but it could be home to an ecosystem of birds, an ecosystem of small animals. How can you steward that ecosystem? How can you be a steward of all the energy the earth can produce and help it to maximize that energy production? And so that's what I try to do. Everything I look at, I don't look at it as like, oh, that grass needs to be cut, oh, that needs to be manicured, oh, we need to, those plants need to be in straight rows. It's not that. It's what can I do to make this ecosystem thrive? So, and what this very question was asked at the premiere in Woodstock, at the Woodstock Film Festival. And Ray, said that the Indigenous person is the person inside of you that is healing, that heals you. If you're feeling depressed, if you're feeling sad, when you start to heal yourself, that is your Indigenous self speaking. And how can you connect with that person? And so I'm still trying to interpret that one, and we'll continue to ask him for guidance on that. And I'm sure it will be a journey that will continue and continue.
Thank you. Krissy, what would you like to add?
I love those answers. I would add that unfortunately, we are never going to be able to outspend the corporations that control our food system and that use their very deep pockets to influence our elected officials. So, winning this fight depends on our ability to mobilize people to overcome the overwhelming amounts of money and corporate power in our political system. So we need to force our elected officials to be accountable to us, their constituents, by demanding that they support legislation that levels the playing field for farmers, supports the kinds of diversified and regenerative farms shown in the film, and protects our air, water, and climate. So Food and Water Watch is currently advocating for legislation that would accomplish all of this in Iowa, Oregon, New Mexico, and New York. And if you live in one of those states, we'd love for you to get involved in those campaigns. And if you don't live in one of those states, you can join our National Food Action Team to help pressure your federal legislators to support all of the federal legislation that I mentioned earlier.
Great. Thank you so much. Let's end with one final question for Matt. Matt, if people take one thing from watching this film, what would you like it to be?
That there's a different way to engage in the food system, and think about all the hands that touch your food and whether or not it's equitable, whether or not how something got to you was equitable. And ask yourself, do you want to be part of an equitable food supply chain, or do you not? Because we all make those decisions every day. And often people think it's about money, about I don't have enough money to pay for that higher price thing. Well, you can grow it yourself. Ray always tells me that in Guatemala there are 36 million backyard chickens, and there's only a population of 16 million people. There is an industrial population of 25 million chickens in Guatemala. So the backyard chickens outweigh the conventional indoor chickens in a country like that. So that's just an example of something culturally different from what we experience in the United States, but something that we can tap into.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for asking such great questions. Thank you so much, Matt Wechsler and Krissy Kasserman, for joining us this evening. Matt, we're so grateful for your time, and thank you for making such an important, informative film that touches every one of us every day. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Before you all go, I have a few announcements here. Let me just remove spotlight. There we go. Let's see. I have something to share with you. It's getting up here. Here we go. All right. Food and Water Watch will continue to fight against the harms like factory farm and corporate greed. If you would like to increase the impact we can have, please consider making a donation or becoming a Food and Water Watch member today. And remember that in honor of Earth Week, all gifts now through Friday will be matched 3 times. As I said before, we don't take any corporate funding, and that's important to me. We aren't beholden to any special interests other than the health of our communities and our planet. Our support comes from people like you, and a gift today will make us help us continue to do this important work. And if you'd like to learn more about our work, you can register right now for our next Livable Future Live event, including our June discussion with our legal team, Food and Water Justice, and we'll put the link for that in the chat. And lastly, but certainly not least, please consider joining us for our upcoming benefit. I would love to meet you all in person on May 6th in New York City, and I hope to see every one of you here online for our virtual conference on May 13th. Please sign up with the link we just put in the chat. Thank you all for joining me tonight. Watch your email inboxes. I'll be sending out the recording of this talk back tomorrow. Take care and see you next time.